Princess Elena had always lived in a golden cage. Every morning, she woke up in a palace room bigger than most people's entire homes. Servants brought her breakfast on silver plates. Her clothes were chosen by stylists, her schedule planned by advisors, and her words carefully watched by the media. But Elena dreamed of something different. She wanted to know what it felt like to be normal, to make her own choices, to have real conversations with people who didn't bow when they saw her. So when the chance came to study at Oxford University for one semester, she jumped at it. The palace officials weren't happy. They worried about her safety, about scandals, about what people would think. But Elena's father, the king, understood her need for freedom. He agreed, but with one condition. She had to use a fake name and keep her real identity secret. That's how Princess Elena Margareta became Lena Martin, just another student from a middle-class family trying to figure out literature and life. Oxford was everything she had imagined, and more. For the first time, she walked into a classroom where no one knew who she was. She stood in line at the cafeteria like everyone else. She did her own laundry, bought her own groceries, and worried about deadlines just like any other student. The freedom was intoxicating, but also scary. Elena had never made a cup of coffee before. She didn't know how to use a washing machine. Simple things that others took for granted were adventures for her. 3 weeks into her new life, Elena discovered a small coffee shop near campus called The Daily Grind. It wasn't fancy, just mismatched chairs, wobbly tables, and the smell of fresh coffee mixing with old books. But it felt warm and real, in a way that palace rooms never did. She was there on a rainy Thursday morning, struggling with an essay about Victorian poetry, when disaster struck. Elena was reaching for her notebook when her elbow knocked over her. Coffee cup. The hot liquid spread across the table and dripped onto the floor and right onto someone else's papers. "Oh no, I'm so sorry." Elena jumped up, grabbing napkins and trying to stop the coffee from ruining more documents. The owner of the soggy papers looked up from his laptop. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and didn't seem angry at all, just a bit surprised. "It's okay, really," he said, helping her mop up the mess. "These are just research notes. I have copies on my computer." Elena felt terrible. The papers were covered in detailed diagrams and calculations, clearly important work. "Are you sure? I can pay to have them reprinted or something." The young man smiled. "I'm David Chen, and honestly, don't worry about it. Coffee accidents happen to the best of us." "I'm Lena," she replied, still feeling guilty. "Lena Martin, and I still feel awful about your research." David looked at the coffee-stained papers and then at Elena's worried face. "Tell you what, Lena Martin, you can buy me a replacement coffee and I'll tell you about my research. Deal?" As they waited in line for fresh drinks, David explained that he was a PhD student studying environmental engineering. His research focused on creating simple, affordable water purification systems for villages that didn't have access to clean drinking water. "There are still over 2 billion people in the world who don't have safe water to drink," David said, his eyes lighting up as he talked. "But with the right technology, we could change that. We just need systems that are cheap to build, easy to maintain, and don't require electricity or complex parts." Elena found herself genuinely fascinated. In all her years of attending charity galas and ribbon-cutting ceremonies, she had never heard someone speak with such passion about actually solving problems rather than just raising awareness. They found a corner table, and David pulled out his laptop to show her his designs. The diagrams were surprisingly simple. Systems that used gravity, sand filters, and solar energy to clean water. Nothing complicated. Nothing that required a factory to build. "The beautiful thing is," David continued, "these systems can be built and maintained by the communities themselves. They don't need to depend on outside help forever. They just need someone to show them how it works." Elena asked, question after question. She had attended hundreds of briefings about global issues, but somehow David's explanation made everything clearer than any official report ever had. "Have you actually built any of these?" she asked. David nodded enthusiastically. "Last summer, I spent 3 months in Guatemala helping a village install their first clean water system. It was amazing to see families who had been walking hours every day for water suddenly have it right in their own community." "That must have been incredible," Elena said, and she meant it. She tried to imagine what it would be like to do work that directly changed people's lives. "It was the best summer of my life," David admitted. "I know it sounds cheesy, but seeing kids drink clean water for the first time, there's nothing like it." Elena realized she had been so caught up in their conversation that her Victorian poetry essay was completely forgotten. She also realized that she had never met anyone quite like David Chen. Here was someone her age who wasn't trying to impress anyone, wasn't looking for fame or recognition, wasn't interested in networking or advancing his career in the typical ways. He just wanted to solve problems and help people. It was refreshingly honest in a way that Elena had never experienced in her royal world, where everyone always seemed to have hidden motives. "What about you?" David asked. "What are you studying?" "Literature," Elena said, gesturing to her abandoned essay. "Though after listening to you, writing about old poems seems a bit trivial." "Are you kidding?" David looked genuinely surprised. "Literature is incredibly important. Stories shape how people think about the world. They help us understand each other better." Elena had never thought about her studies that way. At the palace, her education was seen as something proper for a princess to have, not as something that could actually matter. They talked for another hour, long after both their coffee cups were empty. David told her about growing up as the son of immigrants, how his parents had worked multiple jobs to put him through school, and how he dreamed of starting a nonprofit organization to bring clean water technology to communities around the world. Elena found herself sharing things too, carefully edited versions of her life, but more honest than she usually was with new people. She talked about feeling pressure to live up to other people's expectations, about wondering if she was really making a difference in the world or just going through the motions. "You know what I think?" David said, as they finally packed up their things. "I think you're probably making more of a difference than you realize. Sometimes the biggest impact comes from just being genuine with people, treating them like they matter." As they walked out of the coffee shop together, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the excitement of making a real connection with another person. Not Princess Elena connecting with a carefully vetted potential friend, but just Lena talking with David about things that actually mattered. "Same time tomorrow?" David asked as they reached the street corner where their paths diverged. "I'll be there," Elena replied, and she meant it more than she had meant anything in a long time. Walking back to her small, rented flat, Elena realized that for the first time in her life she was looking forward to tomorrow, not because of what was planned for her, but because of what she was choosing for herself. It was a small freedom, but it felt enormous. The coffee shop meetings became a daily routine. Every morning at 10, Elena would find David at the same corner table, surrounded by engineering textbooks and water purification designs. Every morning, her heart would skip a little when he looked up and smiled. What started as casual conversations over coffee slowly grew into something deeper. David would walk her to her literature classes, and she would sit with him in the library while he worked on his research. They discovered they both loved old movies, terrible puns, and long walks around Oxford's historic streets. Elena had never experienced anything like this before. In her royal world, every relationship was calculated. People wanted to be close to her because of her title, her connections, her future role as queen. But David knew her as Lena Martin, a literature student who sometimes burned toast and couldn't figure out how to fold fitted sheets properly. The hardest part was creating a believable backstory. Elena had to explain why she sometimes disappeared, for days at a time. why she couldn't always answer her phone, and why she seemed to have unlimited money despite being a student. "My family has a business," she told David one afternoon when he questioned why she never seemed worried about money. "Import and export stuff. It's really boring, but it means I don't have to work while I'm studying." David accepted this explanation easily. He assumed her family was well off, which explained her expensive clothes and the way she never worried about splitting dinner bills. But he never made her feel bad about having money, and he never tried to take advantage of it. Instead, David introduced Elena to a world she had never known existed. He took her to his favorite cheap restaurant, a tiny place run by his friend's family where the portions were huge and the prices were tiny. He showed her how to do laundry at the local laundromat, laughing gently when she put a red sock in with her white clothes and turned everything pink. "It's okay," he said, helping her separate the damp pink clothes. "Everyone does that at least once. My mom still tells the story about when I turned all my dad's work shirts purple." Elena loved hearing about David's family. His parents had immigrated from Taiwan when he was 5, working 16-hour days to build their small restaurant business. They had sacrificed everything to give David opportunities they never had. "They still don't really understand what I'm studying," David admitted as they walked through Oxford's botanical gardens. "My mom keeps asking when I'm going to become a real engineer and build bridges or something useful." "But what you're doing is incredibly useful," Elena protested. "You're literally saving lives." David stopped walking and looked at her with such warmth that Elena felt her cheeks turn red. "You really get it, don't you? Most people think clean water projects sound boring compared to building skyscrapers or designing rockets." Elena wanted to tell him that she had spent her whole life attending charity events about global issues, but none of them had felt as real or important as David's work. Instead, she just squeezed his hand and said, "Tell me more about the Guatemala project." As weeks turned into months, Elena found herself falling in love not just with David, but with the person she became around him. With David, she was funny, curious and spontaneous. She could voice her opinions without worrying about political implications. She could be silly without someone reminding her that princesses don't make faces or laugh too loudly. David fell for her too, though he couldn't quite understand why someone as wonderful as Lena would choose to spend time with a grad student who lived on instant noodles and coffee. Elena was smart, kind, and genuinely interested in making the world better. She remembered details about his research that even his advisor sometimes forgot. She asked thoughtful questions that helped him see his work in new ways. Their first kiss happened during a rainstorm. They had been caught without umbrellas while walking back from the library and had taken shelter under an old stone archway. Elena was laughing about how her hair looked like a wet mop when David suddenly got quiet. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You're beautiful," he said simply, "even soaking wet and complaining about your hair." Before Elena could think of a response, David kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and nothing like the formal, arranged interactions she was used to in her royal life. This was real, chosen, wanted by both of them. But as their relationship deepened, the lies became harder to maintain. Elena's security team, who watched her from a distance, grew nervous about her extended time away from the palace. Her mother, Queen Isabella, called more frequently, asking pointed questions about when Elena planned to return and resume her royal duties. "I need more time," Elena would tell her mother during these difficult phone calls. "This research project is really important." "What research project?" the Queen would ask. "You're supposed to be studying literature." Elena would make up stories about special projects, extended essays, anything to buy more time with David. But she could hear the suspicion growing in her mother's voice. The worst part was how the stress began affecting her relationship with David. Elena would get tense phone calls that she couldn't explain. She would suddenly have to cancel dates because of family business that she couldn't discuss. Sometimes she would disappear for 3 or 4 days, returning with expensive gifts and vague stories about visiting relatives. David never pushed for details, but Elena could see the questions in his eyes. He trusted her, but he also knew she was hiding something important. The knowledge created a small wall between them, invisible but real. One evening, after Elena had returned from a particularly difficult weekend at the palace, David found her, crying in their coffee shop. "Lena, what's wrong?" he asked, sliding into the seat across from her. "You've been different since you got back, distant." Elena wanted desperately to tell him everything. She wanted to explain about the palace, about her mother's growing impatience, about the impossible situation she was in. But how could she tell someone who worried about paying rent that she was a princess? How could she explain that her business was actually running a country? "It's just family stuff," she said, wiping her eyes. "They want me to take on more responsibilities in the business, but I'm not ready. I want to finish my degree first." David reached across the table and took her hands. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." That's what people do when they love each other. It was the first time either of them had used that word. Elena looked into David's honest, caring eyes and felt her heart break a little. He loved Lena Martin, the literature student. But Lena Martin wasn't real. Elena was a princess with duties to a nation, expectations to fulfill, and a life that David couldn't possibly understand. "I love you too," she whispered, knowing it was both completely true and completely impossible. As they walked home together that night, Elena realized that her perfect bubble of normalcy was about to burst. Soon, very soon, she would have to choose between the life she had always known and the life she had never dared to dream of. Elena couldn't sleep. For 3 nights she had been lying awake in her small Oxford flat, staring at the ceiling and thinking about David's confused face when she had to suddenly cancel their weekend plans. Another family emergency that she couldn't explain. Another lie to the person she loved most in the world. The phone call from the palace had been harsh. Her cousin, Prince Alexander, was getting married in 2 weeks, and Elena's presence was absolutely required. There would be foreign dignitaries, television cameras, and international media coverage. The future princess couldn't simply skip the event to study literature at university. But telling David the truth seemed impossible. How do you explain to someone that you've been lying about your entire identity? How do you tell a person who counts every penny that you're actually royalty? How do you bridge a gap that big? On Thursday morning, Elena made her decision. She arrived at their usual coffee shop early, before David got there, and spread several items across their corner table. Her real passport, with her full name and royal seal. Printed news articles about recent royal events she had attended. Photos from official palace functions where she wore formal gowns and tiaras. When David walked in with his usual smile and engineering textbooks, he stopped short at the sight of the documents covering their table. "Lena, what's all this?" he asked, sitting down slowly. Elena took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking. "David, I need to tell you something I should have told you months ago." She picked up her passport and handed it to him. "My name isn't Lena Martin. It's Elena Margareta Christine von Habsburg. I'm the 3rd Princess of Oldenburg." David stared at the passport, then at the photos, then at Elena. His face went through several expressions. Confusion, disbelief, and finally something that looked like hurt. "This is a joke, right?" he said quietly. "Some kind of elaborate prank?" Elena pulled out her phone and showed him recent news articles. There she was, in formal royal dress, cutting ribbons at charity events and attending state dinners. The same face, the same smile, but in a world that seemed completely different from the coffee shops and late-night study sessions they had shared. "I wanted to tell you," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "So many times I almost did. But I was scared you would see me differently, that you wouldn't want to be with a princess." David was quiet for a long time, scrolling through the articles on her phone. Finally, he looked up at her, and Elena saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Disappointment. "You're really a princess," he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And, "You've been lying to me about it for months." Elena's heart sank. "David, please understand. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to be normal for once in my life. I wanted someone to love me for who I really am, not because of my title." "But who you really are includes being a princess," David said, his voice getting stronger. "That's not something small you forgot to mention, Elena. That's your entire life." The way he said her real name made it sound foreign and strange. Elena realized that to David, she had always been Lena. "Princess Elena was a stranger. I know I should have told you sooner," she said, tears starting to fall. "But I was scared. In my world, people always want something from me. They want connections or money or status. You were the first person who just wanted to know me." David stood up abruptly, pacing beside their table. "But you didn't let me know you. You let me know a character you created. What else have you lied about? Is any of this real?" "My feelings for you are real," Elena said desperately. "Everything I told you about caring for people, about wanting to make a difference, that's all real. The only lie was about who I am. Who you are is everything, Elena." David sat back down, looking exhausted. "I'm a grad student with $40,000 in loans. My parents work 14 hours a day in their restaurant. I live in a studio apartment with a leaky ceiling. You're literal royalty. We're from different planets." Elena wanted to argue, but she could see his point. When she worried about money, it was about budgets for charity galas. When David worried about money, it was about whether he could afford groceries and rent in the same month. "I have to leave tomorrow," Elena said quietly. "My cousin is getting married, and I have to be there. It's a state event." "Of course you do," David said. There was no anger in his voice now, just sadness. "You have responsibilities I can't even imagine." "Come with me," Elena said suddenly. "I know it's crazy, but come to the wedding. Meet my family. See that part of my world." David shook his head. "Elena, I can't just show up at a royal wedding. I don't have the right clothes, the right background, the right anything. I don't care about any of that. But your family will. And so will the media and the public and everyone else who matters in your world." They sat in silence for several minutes, both understanding that their relationship had just changed forever. Elena realized that all the freedom she had experienced at Oxford was built on a foundation of lies. And David realized that the woman he loved lived in a world he couldn't possibly fit into. "I need time to think," David finally said. It's a lot to process." Elena nodded, wiping her eyes. "I understand. But David, please know that everything between us was real. The way I feel about you, the way we connect. None of that was fake." After Elena left for her cousin's wedding, David spent days trying to process what he had learned. He found himself searching online for information about the royal family of Oldenburg, studying photos of Elena at official events, trying to reconcile the poised princess in designer gowns with the woman who had struggled to use a washing machine. He read about her charitable work, her education, her role in international relations. Elena wasn't just some spoiled rich girl playing at being normal. She was genuinely involved in important work, helping to shape policies that affected millions of people. But that somehow made it worse. David realized that Elena's real life was full of meaningful work and significant responsibilities. What could he possibly offer someone whose decisions influenced international trade agreements and humanitarian aid programs? Meanwhile, at the palace, Elena was facing her own crisis. Her mother, Queen Isabella, had somehow learned about David's existence. Elena found herself summoned to a private meeting in the Queen's study, where a thick folder sat on the polished desk. Sit down, Elena, her mother said calmly. We need to discuss your friend from Oxford. Elena's heart sank as her mother opened the folder. Inside were photographs of her and David together, detailed background reports on his family and finances, and summaries of his academic work. David Chen, the Queen read aloud. 26 years old, PhD student in environmental engineering. Parents own a small restaurant. Currently has $42,000 in student loans. Mother, it's not what you think, Elena began. What I think, the Queen interrupted, is that you've become romantically involved with a commoner while pretending to be someone else. What I think is that you've forgotten your responsibilities to this family and to our people. Elena felt anger rising in her chest. David is a good person. He's trying to bring clean water to people who need it. He's doing more to help the world than most of the people we have state dinners with. I'm sure he's very nice, the Queen said coldly. But nice isn't enough, Elena. You will be queen someday. Your choices affect more than just yourself. That night, Elena sat in her childhood bedroom looking out at the palace gardens she had played in as a little girl. She thought about David, probably back at Oxford, trying to figure out how to feel about everything she had told him. She thought about the life she had built as Lena Martin, and the life that waited for her as Princess Elena. For the first time in her life, she realized that being royal meant more than fancy dresses and charity galas. It meant that her personal happiness would always come second to duty and tradition, but it also meant she had the power to choose what kind of princess she wanted to be. Elena had been back at the palace for a week when she heard the commotion outside the main gates. Shouting voices, car doors slamming, and then her personal assistant rushing into her private sitting room with a look of panic. Your Highness, there's a situation at the front entrance, the assistant said breathlessly. A young man is demanding to see you. Security doesn't know what to do with him. Elena's heart jumped. She ran to her window and looked down at the palace courtyard. There, standing between two very confused royal guards, was David. He was wearing his best shirt and jacket, looking completely out of place but determined. Let him in, Elena told her assistant. Bring him to the garden pavilion. But, Your Highness, protocol requires— I don't care about protocol right now, Elena said, already heading for the door. She found David sitting stiffly in the elegant garden pavilion, looking around at the manicured hedges and marble fountains like he had landed on another planet. When he saw her approaching, he stood up quickly. Elena, he said, and then seemed unsure whether he should bow or hug her or shake her hand. David, she breathed, hardly believing he was really there. What are you doing here? I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, about everything being real. Between us except your name. David ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit Elena remembered well. I realized that I fell in love with your heart, your mind, the way you laugh at terrible jokes. That person is still you, whether you're called Lena or Elena or Princess, whatever. Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes. David, I'm so sorry about the lies. I never meant to hurt you. I know, he said simply. And I'm sorry too. I should have listened better when you tried to explain. I was just shocked and scared about what it all meant. Before Elena could respond, they heard footsteps approaching. Queen Isabella appeared on the garden path, flanked by two advisors. Elena's mother looked elegant and intimidating in her perfectly tailored suit, every inch the powerful monarch. David straightened his shoulders and stepped forward. Your Majesty, he said, attempting what Elena guessed was supposed to be a formal bow, Mr. Chen, the Queen replied coolly. This is quite unexpected. Mother, please, Elena began, but David gently touched her arm. It's okay, he said quietly to Elena, then addressed the Queen directly. Your Majesty, I know I don't belong here. I know I'm not the kind of person you probably imagined for your daughter. But I love Elena, and I think she loves me too. Queen. Isabella studied David with the same careful attention she gave to foreign diplomats. Love is a beautiful thing, Mr. Chen, but my daughter has responsibilities that extend far beyond personal feelings. I understand that, David said. I've spent the last week learning everything I can about what Elena's life really involves. I know about the charities, the diplomatic events, the international relations. I know it's a huge responsibility. And yet you still came here, the Queen observed. Because I think I can help, David said, his voice growing stronger. I'm not asking Elena to give up her royal duties. I'm asking to be part of them. My work with clean water systems. That's exactly the kind of humanitarian effort the royal family supports, isn't it? Elena looked at David with surprise and admiration. He had clearly done his homework about royal charitable work. Over the following weeks, David proved his sincerity in ways that surprised everyone, including Elena. When tabloid photographers started following him around Oxford, trying to get embarrassing photos, David simply continued his normal routine. He went to classes, worked on his research, and treated the intrusion with quiet dignity. When a particularly aggressive reporter cornered David's parents at their restaurant, asking invasive questions about their fortune-hunting son, David handled the situation perfectly. He politely but firmly asked the media to respect his family's privacy, and then made sure his parents were okay. The most telling moment came when a wealthy businessman, hoping to curry favor with the royal family, offered David a large sum of money to step aside and let the princess find someone more suitable. David not only refused the bribe, but reported it to the palace security team. Elena watched all of this from a distance, her respect for David growing every day. She also started to see how she could use her royal platform to support the kind of work David was doing. At her next charity gala, instead of just smiling and cutting ribbons, Elena gave a detailed presentation about global water issues and innovative solutions. The media coverage was different this time. Instead of focusing on Elena's dress or her social schedule, newspapers wrote about her passionate advocacy for clean water initiatives. Several major donors approached the palace about funding water projects in developing countries. David, meanwhile, was learning to navigate royal protocols. Elena's private secretary gave him informal lessons on proper etiquette, and David approached it with the same determination he brought to his engineering studies. He wasn't trying to become someone else. He was just learning the rules of a new environment. The real test came when Elena's water initiative faced a major setback. The primary funding source fell through, threatening to cancel projects that would have served 500,000 people. Elena was devastated, and David could see how personally she took the failure. What if I could find alternative funding? David asked during one of their evening walks through the palace gardens. How? Elena asked. We're talking about millions of dollars. David had been thinking about this problem for days. What if we crowdfunded it? But not just asking for money, actually showing people exactly how the technology works, letting them see the impact of their donations. Elena was intrigued. You mean like a documentary? Better than that. A live demonstration. We build a water purification system right here in the palace gardens, show people how it works, explain how much it costs to install one in a village, make it real for them. The idea was unconventional, but Elena loved it. Working together, they organized an unprecedented royal event. Instead of a traditional charity gala, they hosted a Water Innovation Day, where guests could see actual water purification technology in action. David explained the technical aspects while Elena spoke about the global impact. Videos from Guatemala showed families whose lives had been changed by clean water access. The event raised more money than any traditional royal fundraiser in the palace's history. More importantly, it showed Elena and David working as a true team. Elena's royal connections and communication skills, combined with David's technical expertise and genuine passion, created something neither could have achieved alone. Queen Isabella watched from the sidelines as her daughter and David effortlessly coordinated the event. She saw how David's presence brought out a new confidence in Elena, and how Elena's support gave David the platform to share his work with influential people who could actually help. That evening, as guests were leaving, and the palace grounds were being cleaned up, the Queen approached David privately. "That was well done, Mr. Chen," she said simply. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Elena did most of the work. "Elena had the ideas and the connections," the Queen corrected. "But you had the knowledge and the credibility. You made her vision possible." David looked at Elena, who was across the garden thanking volunteers and donors. "She makes me want to dream bigger," he said. "I always thought I could help a few villages at a time. With Elena, we could change water access for entire regions." Queen Isabella followed his gaze to her daughter. "And what about the other aspects of royal life? The protocol, the public scrutiny, the loss of privacy?" David was quiet for a moment. "I won't pretend it's not intimidating. But if it means I get to spend my life working alongside Elena to help people, then it's worth it." For the first time since David had appeared at the palace gates, Queen Isabella smiled. 2 years later, Elena stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the simple white dress she had chosen for her wedding day. It wasn't the elaborate royal gown that protocol suggested. Instead, she wore something elegant but understated, something that felt like her. The wedding ceremony had been small and private, held in the palace's intimate chapel rather than the grand cathedral where most royal weddings took place. Only immediate family and close friends attended. David's parents sat in the front row next to Queen Isabella, and Elena's heart had swelled seeing her mother chatting warmly with David's father about his restaurant's secret dumpling recipe. Now, 5 months after their quiet wedding, Elena and David were hosting their first major state dinner as a married couple. The evening was centered around a new international clean water initiative that had grown from their successful palace demonstration. Elena watched from across the elegant dining room as David spoke with a group of foreign ministers about sustainable development projects. He wore his formal dinner jacket with the same ease he once wore his coffee-stained engineering shirts. More importantly, he still had that same passionate spark in his eyes when he talked about helping people. He fits in. "Well, doesn't he?" Elena turned to find Ambassador Rodriguez, a seasoned diplomat from Spain, standing beside her with a warm smile. "He does," Elena agreed, pride evident in her voice. "When I first heard that our princess had married an environmental engineer, I wasn't sure what to expect," the ambassador continued. "But watching him tonight, the way he connects with everyone from the kitchen staff to the foreign ministers, it's quite remarkable." Elena nodded, remembering her own amazement at how naturally David had adapted to royal life. He brought the same genuine curiosity to state dinners that he once brought to their coffee shop conversations. People were drawn to his authenticity, whether they were world leaders or palace employees. "He makes the work feel more real somehow," Elena said. "When we talk about global initiatives now, it's not just about policies and funding. David helps everyone understand the actual impact on real families." Across the room, David was now demonstrating something on his phone to a group of ministers. Elena could see him showing photos from their recent trip to Kenya, where they had helped install water systems in 3 rural communities. "And how do you find married life, Your Highness?" Ambassador Rodriguez asked with a knowing smile. "It's wonderful," Elena said simply. "David makes me want to be better at everything. Better at my royal duties, better at understanding people, better at actually solving problems instead of just attending events about them." As if sensing her attention, David looked across the room and caught Elena's eye. He gave her a small smile and a tiny wave, the same gesture he used to give her in their coffee shop days. Elena felt her heart skip the same way it had 2 years ago. The evening continued smoothly, with conversations flowing between tables about everything from trade agreements to cultural exchange programs. Elena noticed how David moved through the room, equally comfortable discussing water purification technology with engineers and trade policy with government officials. At one point, she overheard him talking to the Minister of Health from Ghana about a project proposal. The beautiful thing about these systems, David was explaining, is that they're designed to be maintained by the local community. We're not just installing equipment and leaving. We're teaching people to become the experts in their own villages. The minister nodded approvingly. That's exactly what we need, sustainable solutions that build local capacity. Elena felt a familiar rush of admiration for her husband. David had a gift for making complex technical concepts accessible to everyone, while also understanding the political and social aspects of international development work. Later in the evening, as dessert was being served, Queen Isabella approached a small group that included several foreign dignitaries. Elena was close enough to overhear when one of them, a distinguished gentleman from Austria, made an observation. "Your Majesty, I must say your daughter's husband is quite impressive," the Austrian dignitary said. "He seems to have a remarkable ability to connect with people at every level. Who exactly is he? I mean, what's his background?" Elena held her breath, wondering how her mother would respond. The Queen's acceptance of David had grown over the past 2 years, but Elena knew her mother had initially struggled with her choice to marry outside royal circles. Queen Isabella was quiet for a moment, her gaze moving across the room to where David was now helping elderly Lady Pemberton with her chair, making her laugh about something in the process. "It's interesting that you ask," the Queen said thoughtfully. "When Elena first told me about David, I asked her the same question. Who is he? I wanted to know about his family background, his education, his career prospects, all the things we typically consider important in royal circles." The Austrian diplomat nodded, clearly expecting a conventional answer about David's qualifications. "But Elena's response surprised me," the Queen continued. "She didn't talk about his achievements or his potential. She simply said, 'the human I married.' I didn't understand what she meant at first." Elena moved closer, curious to hear where her mother was going with this story. "Now I realize," Queen Isabella said, "that Elena saw something I had missed. David never lost sight of what matters most, treating every person with dignity and respect, staying true to his values regardless of the circumstances, and focusing on how to actually help people rather than just appearing to help them." The Queen paused, watching as David noticed that one of the young waiters looked nervous and gave him an encouraging smile and a quiet word of thanks. Elena called him the human I married because in a world of titles and protocols and political calculations, David remained fundamentally human. He judges people by their character, not their status. He measures success by lives improved, not by recognition received. The Austrian diplomat followed the Queen's gaze to David. "And that makes him suitable for royal life?" "That makes him essential for royal life," Queen Isabella corrected gently. "Our role is to serve our people, all of our people. David reminds us every day that behind every policy decision, every international agreement, every charitable initiative, there are real human beings whose lives will be affected." Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had never heard her mother speak about David with such obvious respect and affection. "In fact," the Queen continued, "I would say David has made our entire family better at our jobs. Elena's charitable work has become more focused and effective. Our international relationships have deepened because David brings genuine expertise to our humanitarian efforts, and personally, he's taught me to ask different questions when we're making decisions." "What kind of questions?" another diplomat asked. Instead of just asking, "What's the proper protocol?" or "What will people expect?" David's influence has taught us to also ask, "How will this actually help people?" And what would this mean to a family in need? Elena slipped away from the group, not wanting to interrupt her mother's conversation but feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. She found David on the palace balcony, getting some fresh air and looking out at the city lights. "How's it going in there?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her. "Perfect," Elena said, leaning against his chest. "Better than perfect, actually." David chuckled. The Austrian trade minister seemed very interested in the Kenya project. "I think we might have found funding for the next phase." "Is that what you were talking about out there?" "Partly. But mostly we were just talking about our families, our hopes for the future, normal human stuff." David kissed the top of Elena's head. "You know, it's funny. I used to be intimidated by all these important people. Now I realize they're just people who happen to have important jobs." Elena smiled, thinking about her mother's words. "The human I married," she said softly. "What?" "Nothing," Elena said, turning in his arms to face him. "Just remembering why I fell in love with you." As they stood together on the balcony, Elena realized that she and David had found something she hadn't known was possible, a way to honor both her royal heritage and his common origins, creating a partnership that made both of them better people and more effective in their work to help others. Their love story hadn't been easy, but it had been real. And in the end, that made all the difference.